Lady Thatcher decided to give all her papers to Cambridge, her personal papers, because she'd been refused an honorary degree at Oxford, so that was a revenge. And at the same time, she was advised that somebody was obviously going to write her biography, so why not select someone with whom she got on reasonably well and allow them the full access. And she very kindly picked me, and that was way back in 1997. And the deal was I could look at absolutely everything, her papers and government papers, and she encouraged everybody connected with her family and so on, to talk to me, and she talked to me herself. And so it was sort of blanket cooperation. And she also stipulated that she should not be allowed to read the book, and it should not appear in her lifetime, because otherwise people would think she was trying to control it. The most purely revelatory, in the sense of completely new, was this correspondence between Margaret and her sister Muriel that went on from the age of 13 to the age of about 40, which is entirely private and which nobody knew about, and which essentially told you everything you didn't know about Margaret as a teenager, as a student, as a young person working in industry, as a candidate, and falling in love. And there were more boyfriends before Dennis. That had been unknown before. Falling in love, getting married, having children, and becoming a member of Parliament, all seen through this very private, direct, and often very funny correspondence. She wished to cultivate a strong image of herself, but she was also obsessed with privacy, and she hated the idea that people would know about her private life. And though she gave me this complete access, I'm sure she was not pleased that I found out these things, because she had a sense of sort of self-protection. Not that she was ashamed of anything in particular, but just she wanted that sense of protection. And I think in her career as the only woman, it was very important early on that people didn't know too much about her, because they would have tended to use things against her, and she was conscious of that. I think one thing Mrs. Thatcher always did was to promote a very strong image of herself, and of course there was plenty of truth in it. It was an oversimplification, and she was a more cunning politician than she wished us to know. And in fact, part of her cunning was that she didn't want us to know that. And so with the IRA in the hunger strikes, it would be a classic example in which she's genuinely taking a hard line, but also, of course, trying to see through intelligence and secret contacts whether some sort of accommodation can be reached, that there's some chink. And so I think that sort of double act is not a sort of notable piece of dishonesty. It's the sort of thing you'd rather expect. But it's certainly not the sort of thing that Mrs. Thatcher would admit, and she never did admit it afterwards either. She would not talk about that sort of subject. Of course, this book ends with the Falklands War, so the second volume will have much less of the whole span of her life, but much more of her time in government. And so you've got the miners' strike, you've got the relationship with Gorbachev and the end of the Cold War, you've got the massive rows about Europe, and you've got the huge drama of her fall, and as well, of course, as her decline and her death. So it goes from zenith to death, and I think, for example, the fall of Margaret Thatcher, still an incredibly controversial subject, will be, something which one wishes to open up and really examine properly. I think in historians' terms, the hardest bit to write will be about the fall, because it has so many strands, and one of the great challenges of biography is trying to make all the strands, to keep the strands clear, and yet to show how they unite. And there are so many there. It's such a climax and so extraordinary. It has global dimensions and House of Commons dimensions and personal dimensions and party dimensions. It's hugely complicated.